I'm autistic and I was officially diagnosed with ASD and ADHD. And I must admit, I have more hard times than easy times because of those two disorders. As you might know, Japan has heavily collectivism-based culture, which, being different, is usually frowned upon. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down cannot describe Japan better. And obviously people with disorders like me are different from the normal people, different from the crowd. So I might suffer more having ASD and ADHD living in Japan. Today I'm going to be sharing what it's like to be autistic as a Japanese person living in Japan. If you don't know what autism is basically a neurological condition or disorder, however you want to call it, that gives the individual hard time usually communicating, understanding nonverbal communication, basically interacting with other people. Also, many autistic people have sensory issues, like they're overly sensitive to lights, noise, smell, even the texture. These autistic people have nicknames like Aspies. These are not insulting. These are just nicknames for cute way of calling people with autism or Asperger's. And Asperger's syndrome is basically a high-functioning autism, which is a mild version of autism. If you have a severe autism, you might have had a delayed development in speaking and languages early on. But if you have high-functioning autism or Asperger's syndrome, you didn't really have that significant, noticeable difference amongst their counterparts, but you still have trouble communicating because you have trouble understanding nonverbal communication and social cues. I want to talk about my school life. My school life wasn't easy. I didn't struggle with getting scores, high grades at school. I was okay with that. I was not top 10% or something. But since my ASD, which is my autism spectrum disorder, is more dominant than my ADHD, I have more calmer mind than people with dominant ADHD. So I didn't have the problem focusing on a task during a lecture. But I did have a opposite effect, which is hyperfocus. Hyperfocus is something that you can concentrate on one thing for a long time. It sounds like a good feature, but there's a downside, obviously. If you concentrate on or focus on too much one thing, you would just wear yourself out really quickly. So it's like leopard running really fast for short term, but they cannot last for a long time. They lack endurance. I also have a hypersensitivity to lights and noises. That's why I hate fireworks and I hate summer festivals in Japan, because these are noisy, bright, and full of people. So I never understood why people would want to go to those events, really. So how did it affect my school life? Well, first of all, I was a really strange kid in school. I don't have a photo book of my elementary school with me, but if I could show you one day, you see what I mean. There's like one photo of me, like without anyone else hanging out. I was just a loner for a whole life. And I was just staring at the camera like awkwardly with no facial expression. And that was sort of reflecting my autistic feature, because autistic people tend to have a poor facial expressions as well as social interactions. So I didn't have any close friends. I did have one friend, and which is really common amongst like autistic people to have just one friend, but like not so many friends, and I was the perfect example of that. So I didn't have many friends because I wasn't really liked. I was bullied because I was different. This might seem normal. It's not really Japanese thing. If you're autistic, you might be bullied at school. But in Japanese school, since Japan has a heavily collectivism based culture, meaning we have to be like someone else, everyone else. We have to act the same as other people. I didn't fit in. During like PE class, to work with other students on a move or like dance moves or something, I didn't really do well. So that I was bullied too, and I was in a basketball club, and obviously teamwork was not my bread and butter. So a lot of autistic people agreed to that they're not team players. So the coach of the basketball club actually one day told me that I was unfit for the society. He just told me straight to my face. Okay, if you act like this is exactly what he said. If you act like this, you will be unfit to the society. And as a child, everything an adult says is absolutely true, right? That's the only thing we believed in as children. So I told my mom that he told me that. And she was so pissed. She was so upset. And I didn't understand why. I was convinced I was unfit for society because I didn't belong to anyone. I didn't belong to anywhere. I didn't belong to the basketball club. I didn't belong to school. So, typically, middle school. I'm talking about middle school basketball club. 3 years, you go to school. 3 years. Typically, club activity lasts for 2 years and a half. For the rest of the half a year, you basically spend time on studying. That's why you have to kind of quit the club activity to study for the entrance exam to high school. So right after I quit, right after I finished the whole 2.5 years mental torture, I got depressed for the first time in life. I couldn't go to school. Every time I got close to school, I was reluctant to move an inch. That was how severe my condition was. And that's when my mom suspected that I had autism, or some condition. And I was convinced that depression came from pushing myself when I didn't belong to somewhere. I was trying to be someone else. I was trying really hard to fit in to the basketball club, the social norm of the school. Yet I didn't have any friends. I only had one friend, and lots of people bullied me. I was bullied. So I was convinced that I was unfit for society, just like my coach said. I was convinced that I was a loser, and I think it was winter time, my 3rd year of middle school. I was depressed from that mental torture from the basketball club. And then, when you have depression, right, you don't realize how hard you're pushing until you become depressed. Depression is like a bomb. It's like you're like waiting for the bomb to tick and go boom. So like when you're, for example, my case, when I was trying really hard in a basketball club, I didn't even realize I was pushing myself too hard. And then I had a break from the club activity because I finished the 2.5 years period of basketball club team. And then my body is like, okay, now I can release all those depression to my brain. So that's when I got depressed. My bomb boomed. And I was depressed, and at the same time I was pressured by the entrance exam to my high school, because if I couldn't get in, I was so anxious about my future. What if I didn't get in? What if I failed at the exam? Like, what other choices do I have? I don't even have anything to prove to the world or prove to the society. You know, basically I was convinced I was a loser at that time. So I couldn't see any way, other way around than just getting into the exam. But I never had taken an exam at that time, and I was so anxious. I was so worried all the time, nervous all the time. And that's when I decided to just leave the world. And I took my belt and I tried to hang it to my door of my room, and then I tried to do it myself, and my mom heard a creaking sound on the door, and thankfully I wasn't far off after doing that thing. And she started crying really hard. She bursted out crying, and she kept telling me that she was sorry for not realizing how hard I was going through. And I cried a lot too. And that was probably the first time I felt deeply connected with my parents and my mom. Ever since, she knows that I'm autistic, and I tend to push myself too hard. I know this is not really limited to autistic people, but anyone can be depressed. But I think my case was that hyper focus, or just not knowing when to stop. I still have that problem of not knowing when to stop. So I did overwork recently, and I got depressed again in second time in life last year. But I am fully recovered now because I am more compassionate towards myself. I learned to take breaks, so that's why I'm much better. But unfortunately, this kind of mental torture from a school activity or schools isn't uncommon. That was when I begged my parents to let me go to Canada to study abroad. They tried to persuade me to wait until I got into university, but I couldn't wait. I didn't see any way around. I couldn't live in this country, you know. I thought I was done for. And then I just begged my parents, please let me go to Canada. I don't want to live in this country. And then, thankfully, they let me when I was 15. So the young Taiki just went to Canada for the first time alone abroad in his life. And it was terrifying, as terrifying as it sounds. Especially the, switching airplanes and so on. I never had an experience of going abroad, let alone alone. That's where I learned English. That's where I broadened my view of the world as well. I stayed there for a year. So I studied in a language school for 6 months, and studied at high school there, local high school. for 6 months. So total of 1 year. I came back and I got into high school, and high school was nice. It was like a private high school where lots of, you know, weirdos go, just like me, because it's like an international high school that I went to, and those people had very unique personalities. Although it said international, it wasn't really. There were like some American teachers, or to teach us. That's all what international was about. But that was a great experience in that high school. And then I got into university after graduating from high school, and then I'm back to reality again. University wasn't full of unique people like the high school I went to, so I was kind of bored, and I also had trouble again making friends. So I only had one close friend again, like my middle school, and he's not my friend anymore, because he told me that I was a retard. He called me a retard. A university student called another university student a retard. Come on. I thought that kind of insult was over, like in high school. But that happened. And since I trusted him, I felt really betrayed because of that. And I had, again, those thoughts to leave this world. And thankfully, I didn't. But I caught myself really deeply. The betrayal really sucked. And it was kind of accumulating in myself, those stress and worthlessness. And then I started to read. And I started to learn psychology and mental health and so on, and became healthier, mentally healthier. So all those experiences sucked through my entire school life. Most of the experiences I had sucked. But at the same time, because of those experiences, I got into reading, and I got into healthcare, self-compassion, wholehearted living, and so on. And I even wrote books, and I even built a YouTube channel. Now, work life. I didn't have enough work experience in Japan, so I couldn't really speak for those who are in a brutal work culture that Japan is known for. But I did work at a cafe when I was in university, and the owner of the restaurant, the cafe, was really abusive to like everyone. He would talk to like me when I try to prepare for the tables or cleaning up the tables. If I didn't catch the cue like right away, he was like, do I have to repeat myself or something? Or like, can't you see? Or something. He was really speaking in a very condescending tone, and he was always smiling, and it made him even creepier and even more annoying. So that job didn't last long. And the other job, I worked at an apparel shop. It's kind of a big apparel chain franchise in Japan, and that franchise demanded the workers to smile at the store, and I was horrible at it. So like I couldn't even be on the store, be in the shop, because I couldn't smile. You know, I'm thinking, I have a thought like, I smile when I want to smile. So it was really difficult for me. And the other workers, part-timers, were looking at me in a condescending way as well, because I couldn't smile and I couldn't even stand at the shop helping customers. So I didn't feel comfortable. Again, collectivism culture. You have to act like other people. You have to speak in a certain way. From my experience living in Japan and being Japanese, is that Japan has a tendency to assume everyone knows the common sense, and which is really difficult for an autistic person to grasp. I mean, we try, right? We try to understand the social standards, and I think I'm learning much better these days. But since the understanding of the autism or the developmental disorder is pretty shallow still in Japan, unfortunately, many people tend to assume if you don't know like something, you're treated as a fool and you're automatically disrespected. But I know this is not uniquely Japanese, because I read this book, La différence invisible, which is about a woman with Asperger's syndrome in France. And this book says that France is delayed in understanding autism and Asperger's syndrome. If you're interested, you can look it up. I think the English title was The Invisible Difference by Julie Dachet. It's a great book. This is the book that made me want to get diagnosed with ASD and ADHD. I didn't know I had ADHD. Now, adult life, thankfully I didn't have to work in an office, which I wouldn't last a month. I mean, I did work in a nursery school, like English nursery school, after graduating from university, just to try it out, the career, which I knew it didn't last, and it didn't last. It only lasted like 3 months, and afterwards I worked at a call center. It didn't last long either, like 2 months. So I asked my therapist, who gave me the test to diagnose myself with ASD. She told me working in a call center is like the worst job for you in the world. And I was convinced. I didn't do well. I was like the bottom. Now thankfully I have a job that's suitable for me, which is teaching Japanese and teaching you guys about Japan. Japanese society tends to assume autistic people are unfit for the society, just like my coach from middle school said. But you just have to find your calling. If I work with other people, I would still suck, honestly. But if I work alone, I do much better. So I believe that's my strength. And if you have that strength, if you understand your strength, you should embrace it. You should make it work for your passion. Each individual, even if you're autistic, living in Japan, I'm sure it's going to be different from mine, because even every autistic person is different. Every person is different, and lots of people assume people with autism are geniuses, and that's a myth, because Einstein and Steve Jobs and those very small percentage, like Charles Darwin. These people are very small percentage, although they are known to be autistic. So we're just like normal people who are better at something than the normal people, or worse at something than the normal people. We're just different. We function differently. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Until next time.